Hey everybody, what is up? Welcome to another Paragon Git Good guide, and this time we are looking at Narbash, the currently newest hero to grace Paragon's roster of awesome heroes to play. Now, for the second time, I find myself playing and arguably enjoying a support hero as part of the support class. And I know the Fae was debatably underwhelming for me, but this guy, Narbash, is on a whole different level. He's incredibly versatile when it comes to engaging team fights, when it comes to supporting others. He can be used in so many different ways, and his benefits are numerous and plentiful. As you can tell, I really like this fat green guy. He's great. And as I mentioned, he is a physical support caster. So this means that he plays the role of a support and caster combination, kind of like Fae, but at the same time he's more of a melee character, and his abilities kind of revolve around that. His physical attack, his melee attack, or his R2, is Wallop, and it does physical damage. It's melee based. This is kind of the first of the kind, really, for this type of hero. And it's really, really cool because I can build him like I would, say, build Greystone or somebody around that ilk. I can build him kind of tanky, but with more of a focus on things like mana regen, extra health, and then just pure physical damage on top of that, with maybe a little bit of attack speed. And I'll get into that build a little bit later in the video, but let's just talk more about his abilities for now. His first ability is Thunk, and this is the R1 or right mouse click ability. And this is where you throw his drumstick, and it does a reasonable amount of physical damage and stuns the enemy for 0.9 seconds. I've used this stun to do multiple interesting things, like stunning Muriel out of her ultimate, stunning Grux out of multiple pulls, really cool things like that. It's a great ability. I love it. It's incredible for engages, it's incredible for disengages, it's very multifaceted, very good skill. In late game, after I've built around 150 physical damage or so, this particular ability is hitting for several hundreds. The only real downside to this skill is that it has a hefty cooldown of 18 seconds, so if you want to use it a lot more and a lot quicker, you're going to want to build some cooldown reduction. Narbash's next ability is March. Now this gives Narbash and any nearby allies around him, including minions, a boost to their maximum movement speed for 3 seconds. And this is such a good skill, again, for engaging and for disengaging. I use it all the time. I use it to help push towers. Like, for example, if I want my minions to be pushed up more than usual, I'll use that spell just on them alone to get them within tower range faster. It's an incredible skill for that alone. This particular skill shares the same mana cost as Thunk and has a slightly longer cooldown of 21 seconds. So use it sparingly, use it wisely. Next up is Narbash's circle ability called Song of My People. Now this is a toggle ability aura that grants health regen to you and anybody around you and uses mana every second while active. And this uses a hefty amount of mana, 12 mana a second, which can be particularly hefty and damaging early game when you don't have a lot of mana to work with. So that's why I emphasize in my build a little early game mana. But that said, it does heal for a decent amount once you've maxed it out and everything, and it can be quite useful, and as you'll see in this video, it saved my life. And finally, we settle on his ultimate ability, Crash, Bang, Boom. Now this is a damaging applies a maximum movement speed slow that is reasonable, and does a very hefty amount of damage, ending in a knock-up AoE. This is a truly formative ultimate that can change the scope of any team fight, and it scales pretty damn well with physical damage. I had around 150 damage, maybe a bit more, between all of my items, right? And I was doing over 800 damage over that 3-second duration of the ability. It hits like a truck. Just remember, a good chunk of that damage is going to happen at the very end with that knockup, so try to keep enemies close to you. And before we talk about how to play him efficiently, let's talk about how to build him. My build list for Narbash is as follows. I have the Amulet of Veteran. This gives physical damage and health, and then a bunch more health upon completion. I have Brawler's Ward, because everybody should have Shadow Wards, and it gives mana, more mana, and more physical damage, so that's great too. Then I have Silver Spear, and this gives a combination of mana, health regen, and physical damage. Love it. Then I have Tempered Plate because I don't really have a good substitute that gives physical damage and physical armor. So this is the best thing I have. It gives physical armor and health. Next, I have Thorned Greenweave, and this is a great combination card because it gives me energy armor and physical damage. Awesome card. And then I end with Swift Creek Heart. Now this gives a lot of health and is my primary attack speed card. I do use one attack speed card just so that his basic attacks aren't whump, 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 you know what I'm saying? It's just too slow, so I want to be able to do some damage when it comes to basic attacking in between my long cooldowns. And as for my upgrade cards, I use a smattering of 2 CP cards, Barrier Guard, Heal, Health, Mana, Spark, and Strike, and then I have a few cards that are singular. I've got Greater Barrier, Greater Guard, only one of those, Greater Heal, one of those, 2 Greater Healths, 3 Major Kinetics, 6 Major Strikes, and then a couple of 1 Pure Mana and 1 Pure Spark for mana regen. So that's pretty much my build as a whole, and I find it works because it gives me a good amount of health. It gives me a lot of defense where I need it. So if I look at the enemy team, I can dictate, okay, are they more physical damage or energy damage? And I'll usually just focus on building that one type. However, if there's a good mix, I'll build both at the cost of some physical damage. But every card in here gives physical damage on top of giving things like health, resistances, mana, health regen, and mana regen, which can really sync up well with all of his other abilities, making him very versatile and hard to kill and damaging at the same time. What I especially like in my build is this 1 CP card that's rare called Shepherd's File, and it's a mana potion, and it gives me 2.85 mana regen for me every second for 15 seconds. But on top of that, everybody else around me gets 10 health regen per second for 7 seconds. So this works really well with the one ability, Song of My People. I pop Shepherd's File, I get some mana regen so Song of My People doesn't hit as hard, and I heal for a very respectable amount on top of my ability in the file itself, and I just like it. It's especially helpful early game. Late game, of course, it falls off, and then you just sell it and replace it with whatever else. Alright, now let's talk about how you actually want to play this support bruiser. Early game, I will always lane on the left or right side, depending on where I'm at. I like to focus on the side that has blue, so that my teammate and I can go back there and get blue buff, and that will allow me to keep him healed the entire time because I've got some crazy good mana regen while in lane and while we're in the laning phase. When it comes to early game, though, I always go with the health potion, the mana potion of whatever I got, which is the file, and then the strike token. And I don't start any wards, so I'm always very careful in letting my teammate know that, hey, we don't want to overextend during this very early part of the game where ganks are especially deadly. But once we both have 9 CP, or at least I have 9 CP in total and 6 CP to spend, I will go back and get my first item, which is Shadow Wars. And I do this every time, because it gives mana and it gives physical damage. The first skill that I start off with is always Thunk, because I find that it's the most powerful. Now that could be argued that his movement spell, or skill, would be also very useful early on, just for quick getaways, or for some quick engagements if you are a part of a gank on the enemy, but it's subjective because your Thunk can be just as strong. It does a very hefty amount of damage early on, and it stuns for that almost full second, so yeah. As for skilling, I do like to max out Thunk first just for the pure damage that it gives, as well as it gives you some opportunity to farm a little bit easier, just because if you think that you're not in range to do some melee attacks, you can use Thunk every now and then to get one of the enemy minions. And then after that, I will skill his movement spell, because moving faster I find is a little bit more important than healing an extra 5, 10, or 15 health every second, and it doesn't drain the mana like the Song of My People does. So Song of My People is last, Ultimate always comes first, of course. And then back to card building. Once I've gotten my Shadow Ward, I will try to build something that counters the enemy in terms of the kind of damage that they have. So for example, if the enemy team has a lot of physical damage, I'll build my physical armor item. Or if they have a lot of energy damage, I'll do the opposite. And then after that, it just becomes a game of what exactly do I need at this point in time? Do I need more mana regen? I try to react to the enemy team as much as I can, and I try to react to the circumstances of the game itself as best I can within my item set. Now, like Faye, and unlike some of the other pure supports like Muriel or Decker, you can really pump out some damage with this guy once you've used Thunk, once you've used his ultimate, and even with his basic attack if you have a little attack speed to go with it. I wouldn't build anything like crit or penetration on this guy, but just some raw damage, a little raw attack speed, really goes a long way because his scaling is quite excellent on a couple of his damaging abilities. And now we'll finish with some tips for using his skills. Remember, his one ability is a great interrupt on any sort of channel ultimate or channeled ability, so I always keep that in case there's, say, another Narbash on the team using his ultimate, or if I want to try to interrupt a Grux or a Richter, or anybody who can be interrupted, especially a Gideon. Even if I sometimes miss such opportunities, it can still be very helpful. His ultimate, though, is incredibly powerful, and you want to use that when you are right in the thick of things, and that's why I build tanky, so that I can handle living for 3 to 5 seconds while being in the middle of everybody, and then just bam, the knockup happens. They've taken a lot of damage from my ultimate alone, let alone all of my teammates doing what they're doing. It's such a good skill. The cool thing about Narbash, though, is that he is a incredibly reactive hero. He can be played both as very aggressive and very defensive, and he works great in both areas. I had one instance before where I was in the enemy jungle, and we were basically cut off. I was cut off from my teammates. I had enemies in front of me and enemies behind me. So what I did was I dropped my ultimate, even though nobody was nearby to feel it. It kept them at bay long enough for my teammates to wipe out the dudes in front of me and then come to my aid. And the enemies behind me, they didn't get close because I was ultimating, and they didn't want to get caught up in a potential gank or being potentially out of place. So it's a great way to separate enemy teammates from each other, I found. I do want to stress the importance of having enough mana regen and enough mana as a whole to capably use Song of My People throughout an entire team fight, because it really does help keep your team alive, especially if they're in range of it, because you're pumping out 15 to 20 heals every second to everybody, and you'd be surprised how effective that actually is. You just have to make sure you have the mana for it, and that's why 3 of my items have something to do with mana or mana regen. Now, alternatively, you could sacrifice some of that physical damage or even some of that defense as a whole and go for cooldown reduction so that your crowd control is a little bit stronger through much shorter cooldowns, but really it's up to you on that one. I prefer the more sustained damage of being able to do basic attacks and being able to be in the fight longer thanks to all of my defensive items, but hey, that's just my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comments down below as far as what kind of build you like using for this guy. Do you like this hero at all? Do you think he's a great support? I personally think he's a great support, but I would love to hear otherwise. We'll have a cool discussion about it. Thank you for watching very much. Make sure to subscribe for more videos like this every 2 days. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you feel that it helped you out in any way, please hit that like button. I would greatly appreciate it. I also appreciate your viewership and you stopping by and just interacting with my channel as a whole. Thank you again for watching, and I will catch you next time.